Everybody, thanks for watching and thanks for taking the time to purchase and support. Welcome to the 6th book in the Biblical Bible series, which is the book of Joshua. We just completed the 5 books of Moses, which is considered to be the law. When you look at how the 66 books are broken down, they're broken down in sections. So we just finished the law. We are now beginning to get into what they call the historical or the history of the Bible, the historical parts. What they are trying to say is actual history of the Hebrews, which we understand completely is bullcrap. So it's important to note that when we get into these next, I believe, 17 books, it's considered the history. So one, when you look at the stories in these books, and we're going to go through some crazy stuff, it's clear as day. One, it's more fairy tale, fiction, which is why I always talk about the Bible being in the fiction section of in the library or in your bookstores. Clearly fiction. It is crazy and far-fetched for them to note these books as being historical. You know, historical books as if this stuff actually happened. It's crazy. So we can understand once we get into a lot of these stories that clearly this is stuff that it's not true. So if you guys hear any noise in the background, if you're picking up any low hiss or sound, I apologize for that. It's just the air conditioner. But as we go along, you can understand why preachers do not want to teach the Bible from Genesis to Revelation. Because if you start going through the book, if you go through it verse by verse, book by book, you're going to run into the problems of the Bible. You're going to run into all the evils of the Bible, and people with rational minds are not going to be able to get through some of the stuff that takes place. It's just absurd. We don't let this stuff slide in our, true lives. It's hard to accept this stuff as being fact, one, but as this powerful, good, loving God doing these crazy, sick stuff to these people. And you're going to see as we go along, a lot of the stuff that people are holding on to as far as the Bible that they believe is real and true and the so-called goodness of God, you're going to see fall apart. You're going to see God continuously do evil in the Bible as you go along, and it's going to raise questions, and it's questions that scholars and Bible believers ask all the time. How can this be a good God if he's doing these things? And anybody with common sense would say, well, it can't be. There's something more to the story. So we're going to go through a lot of this stuff. But the main thing is for you to see past the so-called historicity of the Bible, and to understand that, of course, it's not history. It's bullcrap. It's bogus. But, it's going to be hard for people to see what we're seeing, to analyze the Bible in this context, the way we have been doing so far, looking at the Greeks as being the Hebrews. It's not many people who are putting that together. A few scholars did, and it's good to see that when you put in a lot of work, that other people have come to the same conclusions. But, it's not going to be easy for people to put it into the context that we're putting it into in these books. In these Bible series, because it's just far-fetched for people. People can't fathom that we're talking about the same people, the Hebrews and the Greeks. And Dr. Joseph Yehuda probably did exactly what I did doing the research, and it's one of the reasons why I actually started doing the research that way, reading his book, was, looking at the fact that if we're going to try to pick up this history and find it in real history, that we can find in books, then, it doesn't fit anybody but the Greeks. All these wars and everything that was going on around this time, the only people you find making noise is the Greeks. So then when you start to do the comparison, it's not hard. So we left off Deuteronomy, the death of Moses. Joshua is basically the new leader. God has given him, his instructions and telling him to basically go on, and continue them taking the promised land or what have you. So, as I talked about before, we understand, as I just said, this is nothing but the conquering of the Greeks, conquering African territory. And Joshua is just going to continue the same process of conquering. It's just that simple. So they're calling it the history, and you have to pay attention to that, the history. And it is history. It's just, misconstrued and scrambled and not put in put it out correctly, and you have to break it down and figure out what they're really talking about, which is what we are doing, in the video. So it is the history, and we're going to go through it and see what it's really talking about. So when you start to get into it, Joshua's just basically picking up where Moses left off. Now, a lot of you was basically asking me about which Bible am I using, and again, I told you guys before, we're going to go through it using the Masonic King James Version. You can use the King James Version as well, but the Masonic one is just the one I'm going to use because there's a lot more to it, some stuff hidden that we're going to be able to really dig into more as we go along, as I'll point out eventually, but we're going to use the King James Version. Now, it's saying here in Joshua, this is Joshua chapter 1. Now after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, it came to pass that the Lord spake unto Joshua the son of Nun, Moses' minister, saying, Moses my servant is dead. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, thou and all this people, unto the land which I do give to them, even to the children of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot shall tread upon, that have I given unto you, as I said unto Moses, for the wilderness and this Lebanon, even unto the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites, and unto the great sea, toward the going down of the sun, shall be your coast. There shall not any man be able to stand before thee all the days of thy life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with thee. I will not fail thee, nor forsake thee. So again, common sense question, how is it that God is going to be able to give these people this land? They call it the promised land. Keep saying that it's their inheritance. And we understand an inheritance is something that's passed down from your parents, and this land didn't belong to their parents. This is something that this God is saying, which we all understand, this God being, the powers that be, saying that this is your land, go and take it. Now, the only way they can take it is to take it, to commit murder. This is where we got to cut the bullshit of the Bible and get into people's head and get them to understand what's taking place here. What are you talking about? This God is supposed to be just and loving and what have you, and the creator of everyone, when he's giving the order to go and kill his own people that he supposedly created. You have to look at the Bible or look at religion in the context that everybody is talking about today, as having this God being all-knowing, loving, or what have you. The same God who's supposed to care about everybody and all these rules supposed to be in play, telling these people to go out and murder, kill infants, which we'll get into, babies or what have you, kill them all, everything, and take this land that's promised to you. And as we're going to continue to see with these Hebrews, these people are not even following the law. So if we can say, if you want to say that God came and this is his chosen people, and God is choosing to kill all these people in this promised land because they are disobeying God, or they are worshiping false idols, or what have you, anything you want to say, what you're going to see as we go along is the Hebrews doing the exact same thing that these people who they are wiping out are supposedly doing and getting by. How is these people supposed to be special and set apart when they are clearly doing the same thing as everybody else? So this is how one of the things you can see and understand that it's bullshit. It's bogus what it's talking about, but this is important for you to know, what they're calling the history. And this is how we're going to break it down and really understand it. But clearly, you can't justify people getting land through the means of murder, which is just crazy. So, God basically tells Joshua to keep the law, coming out of his mouth, to know it. To know the law, keep talking about it, meditate on it, and don't ever let the law leave his lips. And as I said, Joshua goes on to continue the conquest. So it's saying here, this is Joshua chapter 2, verse 1. And Joshua, the son of Nun, sent out of Shittim 2 men to spy secretly, saying, Go, view the land, even Jericho. And they went out, and they came unto a harlot's house, which a harlot is a prostitute, named Rahab, and lodged there. And what we're going to see in the beginning of Joshua, they're trying to take basically Jordan. I mean, this is the whole story with Jericho and everything that's going to come up here. As we get into, or as you read the first books of Joshua, not too many people are going to be able to put together what's taking place here. So, they're going to take try to take Jericho, try to basically take Jordan, but you have to understand how the story is being put together, how we are basically seeing the story of Moses over again, because Joshua is basically doing the same thing. Now, what you'll see here is the Bible recycles stories. It does this a lot, and there's a reason for it, as we'll get into. But, they did this before. Well, when you understand with Joseph and Jesus, which we'll get into later, of course. But you'll start to see as we go along with Joshua that a lot of the stuff that Moses did, Joshua does, and the same type of stuff that the writers wrote about far as the major things of Moses, or issues with Moses, we're going to see with Joshua. But if you remember from Joseph and New Testament Jesus, take a look at some of the stuff that is basically the same. A lot of people was trying to say that, the Jesus character, and this is one of the arguments of the Hebrews or the Jews, that the Jesus or Christ character is based off of Joseph when you look at Joseph. So we know with Joseph, you had a miracle birth. Jesus was also a miracle birth. Same thing with Joseph. Joseph had 12 brothers. Jesus had 12 disciples. Joseph was sold for 20 pieces of silver. Jesus was sold for 30 pieces of silver. So you had Judah, who suggested the sale of Joseph, and you had Judas, who suggested the sale of Jesus. Both men started their ministry at age 30. Joseph started at 30. Jesus started his ministry at age 30. So this is something a lot of people pointed out before, as them basically trying to use the Joseph character to basically, piggyback off with the creation of Jesus. And when you look at the whole thing with Moses basically leads the people out of a state of oppression. Supposedly oppression, them being oppressed in Kemet. So he leads them out of a state of oppression, and you have Joshua lead them into a state of conquest when they are conquerors and they are conquering these lands. So you have that parallel right there. You have Moses parting the sea. You have Joshua drying up the river. Remember when they coming into Jordan, basically on the way to Jericho, he dries up the river. The river runs dry for them to walk on. So you have, the parting of the water with Moses, and you have the drying of the river with Joshua. You have under Moses, the Hebrews basically disobey God. The same thing as we're going to see is going to happen under Joshua. They're going to disobey God. Under with Moses in power, Moses dies at the end of his books, which is the 5 books. It's the end of Moses. At the end of this book, as you will see, Joshua dies at the end of his book. So you have the same comparison where the Bible is basically recycling stories for a reason, and we'll get into that. But you're going to see this throughout the book. As we're going through this, you're going to see it's stuff that's going to jump out to you that you never heard of before, never seen. It's going to make you just question everything. Like, why the hell didn't they tell us about this? There's so many stories within the book that is really going to help you understand it more. And this is one of the reasons why I'm doing this, because until you read it all the way through and you start, going through it as if it's a one big long story, that's the only way you're going to see the contradictions, the flaws, the problems, the issues, and the hidden story that's behind the books of the Bible. So, we're going to pick up on a lot of this stuff as we're going through. So now you have Joshua sending out spies out into the land. Remember, Joshua was one of the 12 spies that Moses sent out to basically spy on Israel before. So he was one of those spies. Now he goes out, sends these spies. The spies run into a woman named Rahab, who is basically a harlot, a prostitute. She takes them in. Now she says basically, we've heard about you. And this is one of the major parts, as I talked about before, that you got to really understand when it's talking about here, the histories of the Bible. This history can only be found within the Bible. So, of course, you would think during this time where you got the Hebrews doing so much conquest and conquering that the neighboring territories and land would get wind of these Hebrews who seemingly have this God or this power behind them. You would think that everybody would know and either try to come together to do something against them or at least write about them. You will find something that a civilization put out, talking about how powerful these Hebrews is. Any other major civilization that we find in history, look at the Caesars. Look at the Greeks. Look at the Egyptians. Look at the Mayans. Look at so many civilizations that left stuff all over, that you have people from distant territories and places or what have you speaking about that specific people because they did something so amazing. So if the Hebrews was, people who was going out conquering and doing so much, you would think we would find something on them outside of the book itself, which we do not. So basically Rahab takes them in, and she basically says, I heard about you guys. I know that God is basically on your side, so I will take you in, I will hide you, and all I want is when y'all do your thing, because she knows they're going to basically destroy everything. When y'all kill everybody, just leave me and my family alone. So that's basically what she says to him. Leave me and my family alone. When y'all come in here and do your thing, I will hide y'all, I will tell y'all whatever y'all need to know in exchange for that. But you have to also remember, repeatedly, God tells them that do not leave nothing alive. Destroy everything that breatheth. Kill them all. Make no covenant with them. Remember that part. So that's basically, covenant is a deal. You might as well say. So they basically say okay, and they make a deal with Rahab to not destroy her family, what have you, and that's what would come to pass. So this is something you have to look at, and really, they really want to get you guys to understand the genocide, the murder, justify it somehow of the Hebrews and what they was doing, and to try to get you to warm up to the part that eventually these people will keep disobeying God so much that they will fall. This is what you'll see that's iterated a lot, over and over again. This constant deception and constant disobeying, and I should say, of the Hebrews of God's law. So now all the scholars and people who read the book look at this point, including the Jews themselves, and say, this is unbelievable. This is a shame. And you have people who are seemingly okay, why are they being slaughtered by God, who's supposed to be so loving and merciful? Now you have the Jews call this period, because you have to look at this period as a people and say, what is this that we supposedly did so much murder and committed so much genocide on the planet, that this is somehow justified or right? So the Jews call this the herem. The herem basically tries to justify or basically try to explain the murder and genocide of the Jews. So now it says here, and this is basically exploring the deeper meaning of the herem. In the Old Testament, there are a number of books that contain violent stories that may shock the casual reader. Of course, some of these stories seem to encourage not only the slaughtering of enemy armies, but also the murder of innocent civilians. The book of Joshua in particular contains a number of such tales. In chapter 6 through 11 of the book, God instructs Joshua and his followers to obliterate dozens of enemy armies, and subsequently orders them to lay their towns to waste. Joshua and his followers put to death men, women, children, and livestock by the edge of the sword. Biblical scholars refer to this process of systematic destruction in which all those who oppose the Lord are laid to waste as the herem. Many readers find this concept to be highly disturbing. Some feel it runs counter to Christian and Jewish belief. They question why the loving and merciful Lord would command his followers to carry out these gruesome acts. So now when you read that, it makes you believe that they understand what's taking place in the Bible is wrong. And that if you put this in the context of today, with human life today, real world, if you had a person that was purposely, knowingly taking human lives, what you side with that person. If his reasoning was, these people are evil. To me, these people are evil. They're not doing what I say they should do. They're not doing the right thing. They should be killed. I mean, of course, in that context, you wouldn't take their side. You would say this person is crazy. So you have, in certain instances where you have people looking at this whole instance of murder and genocide or what have you, and they're taking the side and trying to justify it somehow, and when you continue to read, if you was to read that whole explanation there of the herem, that's basically what they try to do. They try to say that, the murder of these people is somehow good, for Israel and good for the people, and basically trying to express how God is basically trying to teach these people a lesson, and maybe that God has a better divine, feature for these people that's killed, or it's just all, part of some plan, and just these people were purposely put here for the Hebrews to murder, and, to justify their existence, or to bring their existence into some kind of, purposeful meaning that's going to be beneficial to everybody involved. I mean, it's just fucking bogus when you pay attention to it. What it really is, and I talked about this before, is to justify to later generations the murder and genocide of innocent men, women, and children. It's just that simple. Now, if you get the people at the highest ranks to buy into the biblical stories, then that's easy to do. But it's going to be harder for you to get just regular Joe Blow to go along with killing and murdering innocent people. So the Bible is just one of the justifications for that. So when we today and people in later societies look at what their people are doing to other people, they can say, okay, well, this has been done for years. This is the way it's always been done. This is war. Kids die in war, and there is no justification for the killing of an infant. I just don't understand that, especially on the part of a God who supposedly put the souls in all of mankind, for him to create, this supposed soul in this child, knowing that this infant is going to be killed and slaughtered in a brutal way, a brutal way, by a sword, by some soldier some Hebrew that he's commanding. I mean, think about that, a baby. So, this goes into, which we'll get into eventually, the whole thing with the sacrificing of the children and what's going on with the church and everything like that, all the pedophilia, which is in the Bible, pedophilia we'll get into, and so much more. So, it's the justification of that. When we look at the troops today, look at what these soldiers got to go through, going to countries, blowing up buildings and killing innocent people, and we've seen the pictures and the videos on the news of the babies being crushed in these Syria with the buildings falling and what have you. These religious people look at this as, just habits of war, things that take place, things that must happen because the greater good is more important, And, until people are put in that situation, they never going to understand how wrong it is. People just, and we do it too as black folks. We just, whatever. And it goes with that whole thing, our cry for, freedom and justice or what have you. And, you have to look at the fact that if they are willing to go ahead and wipe out one of the most holiest lands in existence, Syria, when you really pay attention to the Bible and everything we're talking about with the wars of the Diadochi, everything we're talking about now in the beginning of the 5 books of Moses, you're talking about so much biblical history taking place in that area. Talked about Isaiah, 17:1 with Damascus, the whole prophecy. So much biblical history is right there. For them to be bombing it should tell you something. Now, to the believer, they will look at it and say, well, they're just fulfilling a prophecy. This is what God said would happen. And this is how, they can justify it. But, reading these verses and seeing what's taking place is different for us when you understand the context of it. As I said, you have to understand it is the Greeks conquering our lands. The lands that you see today that you believe belong to these people was once ours. You have to understand how many European nations are still there. Even with Serbia, Greece, we know, Carthage and Greece, all of it was ours. Rome, ours. These lands that's right here was our lands, occupied by African people. What we're reading is the destruction, the genocide, the murder of those people and the taking of those lands and how those lands, became what they are today. So when you understand that, understand what it's saying in the book, and when it's talking about history, that is the history. And these people are not the people they say they are, as we know. But the story goes on, and we'll see how that unfolds to reveal us the truth. So we have to look at these, 5 books, these 6 books we in now. The beginning of the Bible, beginning with what? I mean, it's not hard to make this connection, which we're going to get into this again. But quick connection. When we look at history itself, where it's beginning, seemingly beginning with Kemet. And then you have all of a sudden the rule of the Europeans, the fall of Egypt, the rise of the European powers, what's taking place. When you look at the beginning of Genesis, you have clear as day, them, talk about Egypt, and eventually them coming into power, so on and so forth. But, we're going to get into this later. But you have, as I said before, Rahab taking the people in, and her basically explaining to them that she understand who they are. But we want to read this. So it's saying here in this chapter 2:9, and she said unto the men, I know that the Lord hath given you the land, and that your terror, choice word, terror, is fallen upon us. Think about that. And that all the inhabitants of the land faint because of you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when ye come out of Egypt, and what ye did unto the 2 kings of the Amorites that were on the other side, Jordan, Sihon, and Og, whom ye utterly destroyed. And as soon as we had heard these things, our hearts did melt. Neither did there remain any more courage in any man because of you. For the Lord your God, He is God in heaven above and in earth beneath. And again, you have to get into this to understand what we're talking about here with these people calling this a loving and just God. I mean, we make ourselves believe in these explanations, but you have to ask yourself. I mean, it's not saying in the book that I want you to go out and try to convert these people. If they convert and listen to you and believe that the Lord is with you and what have you, then we leave these people alone. They can join the group. He's saying, forget that. Give them no chance. He's saying, forget that. Give them no chance. No choice to survive. Just kill them. And it makes you want to understand, because we're not giving any story. We're not giving a story or justification for the murder and genocide of these people. Plain and simple. It's not given to us. Why kill them? Unless this is takeover, which is what it is. We trying to justify it in the sense that, God knows all. He knows what's best. And for some reason, these people are supposed to be wiped out and destroyed. But when you have a person come forth with an understanding, I mean, it's one thing to think of it as if these people are some like monsters or something, devil worshippers, demons, or what have you. And we're going to get into this later, because there's a reason why they keep putting these people with worshiping Baal, which we'll get into that. It's no justification though. It's not saying anything like that. It's just saying utterly destroy them, get them out of here, because this is a takeover. We wasn't doing nothing wrong. But when you have a person come forward and just seemingly be normal, and it's basically asking you for mercy, saying, we heard about y'all. Like, if it's something that we can do to change in order to not be slaughtered, we'll do it. But, it seems as if, and as she said, from her point of view, the terror of you and your God has fallen on us, and we're trembling and we're scared and we're worried. Do what you got to do. Don't kill my people, is what she'll say later. But look at the context in which she put it in. And your God and your Lord, and they try to make it like, this God is the right God or what have you, and it's crazy. But throughout in the Old Testament, it's giving you the understanding of these different gods, plain and simple. And that's something that a lot of people don't just pick up on or even elaborate more on, is why is it that it seems as if God is worried about these gods as if they really exist and have more power or equal power to him. That's something you got to think about, which again, we'll get into. It's deep, but you got to look at that. Like, why is it, like, if you're supposed to be the number one, the only guy who created all this, who is these so-called guys they're talking about? Because you're not going to sit there and worship these guys if there's no power coming from them. But yet we turn and we look at Israel, the Israelites, and they come in, they got all this power and all this magic and stuff happening with them, and they conquering and taking over. tell me who's the true God. Why would it even be any opposition to this God who created everything? Why would you create opposition for yourself? And this is stuff they're not going to talk about. You have to ask yourselves these questions. If you're a God, you're a jealous God. You wiping out millions of people because you're a jealous God, because they worshiping things that you created. Why would you create your competition? It just doesn't make sense. So you have to understand when it's trying to give you takeover, conquest, and no explanation. That's what it's giving you. And it's the preacher's job to get you to accept that, for you to just say, well, this is what God wants, so that's the way it is. And this is what people are doing. So the Hebrews, as we're going to get into in the next book, in Judges, more crushing for the Hebrews, as you'll see. They're trying to look at this stuff leading up to, because we already passed Deuteronomy, but leading up to modern day, and giving you an excuse as to why we are in this situation. And as you're going to see in Judges, and it's just crazy. But this is sort of kind of, as I've been talking about, the conquest of us and what's taking place, and them trying to basically justify somehow that this is supposed to happen. But you have Rahab basically saying, we heard about you. And as I said before, you would think she's talking about, we heard about the parting of the sea. We heard about this. Remember, she said that we know about the river drying up. We know about y'all people going to conquer. And if she heard about it, then other people heard about it. Other civilizations heard about it. Nobody wrote about it. Nobody talked about it. Nobody put it in stone. There's no myths or legends that was passed around during that time in these areas about this stuff happening. So it's only in the Bible. It only exists within the book itself, because it's bullshit. So that's also one of the reasons why, God tells them in the Bible to basically destroy everything. Leave nothing alive. No person alive. Destroy all of their idols. Destroy everything, and just basically keep, the cattle, and split that up, and, anything that's edible, what have you. But destroy all the idols. Destroy all the people. This is their way to try to justify the fact that, well, it was nobody alive to write about what happened. You understand how that fits? It's real convenient for them now, so they can just say, well, they killed everybody. So how could these people write about, what was going on? But they didn't kill every civilization.